We've already seen that computers back things by data, by numbers. And in the case of even text like words, we saw back in Chapter 7 that those words and letters were backed by numbers. Each letter ended up being represented by a particular number. Well, when we want to work with a whole other category of games, such as tic-tac-toe, Sudoku, Minesweeper, anything that involves a map, or even just plain image data, those items have a two-dimensional array behind them. They're backed by a grid of numbers. Now, we can call these numbers a matrix, a two-dimensional array, or a list of lists. Basically, they mean very similar things. It would just be too easy if we called them the same word. We're going to start by showing how this works with a simple tic-tac-toe board. We've got either a blank, an O, or an X in each one of those spots. And there's a total of 9 spots. 3 rows of 3 items. We can back these by a list. In this list, 0 represents a blank, 1 represents an O, and 2 represents an X. Behind each of these, we take that list. It basically backs the grid with those sets of numbers. But that only allows us to have the first row. We need to back the next 2 rows by 2 more lists, and what we end up with are 3 lists, or really a list of 3 lists, in order to represent the tic-tac-toe board. This is another example of an array-backed grid. Over here on the left, I have a classic Minesweeper type of application. Over on the right, I'm showing something that you don't normally see, and that's the array-backed grid that represents everything that's happening in the Minesweeper program. In this case, I've got 0 that hooks up and represents this square right here, and over here, this 0 represents this square. Likewise, if I check down here, I've got a 0 here, and it represents this square. In the case of the 10s, these are the hidden mines. Naturally, you wouldn't show this in a real Minesweeper game because it would take all the fun out of it if you knew where the mines were. But in this particular case, here I've got a 10, and here I've got a mine right here. Let's go ahead and play this game and show how that works. To begin with, I'm going to click up here in the upper left, and I can see that when I do this, the numbers over here on the right change. In this case, the 9s represent empty squares over here. And the 1s represent that I need to display a 1, where I'm only 1 away from a particular mine. In this case, I can see that I've got mines right here and right here, which would correspond to right here and right here on the board. That makes sense. Let's go ahead and play a bit more. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and click on a mine here, and game's over. You can see how I can take a game like Minesweeper and back it by an array of numbers. It's a really useful technique when creating games.